Hi everyone, meteorologist Steve Caparotta here with another episode of Coast and Climate. As you all probably know by now, the official start of hurricane season is right around the corner. It's time to start getting prepared. So with that in mind, I thought I'd bring in a guest today that can help us start thinking about what we can do around our homes and maybe some simple tips on getting your home ready for the upcoming hurricane season. So with that in mind, I'm happy to welcome in Dr. Ian Giammanco. Dr. Giammanco works for the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. He's the Senior Director for Standards and Data Analytics and also is the lead research meteorologist there at IBHS. But before I start asking you some questions on how we can get prepared, Ian, tell everybody a little bit about how you got to where you are right now, your career path, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a Baton Rouge native, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Baton Rouge. My parents still live in town over by Lady of the Lake Hospital. And most of my family is within about 40-mile radius of Baton Rouge. So I've got aunts and uncles in Prairie View down in St. Charles Parish. I went to University of Louisiana at Monroe, played baseball there, also got my atmospheric science degree, and then went on to Texas Tech for my master's and my PhD work. And I really have been studying the weather ever since. And it's been a passion of mine since really 1992. And I think a lot of you in Baton Rouge may remember that event. That was our Hurricane Andrew landfall. And that's what set me on the path to weather.
Yeah, so quick story time from Uncle Steve here, Ian. I grew up in Metairie, and my family got a little bit nervous as Andrew was approaching. We actually evacuated up to Baton Rouge against my objections. I was at the time a junior in high school, objected to that evacuation, but we ended up here. So we went through it in Baton Rouge. So I totally understand where that passion, that interest comes from, having been here as Andrew moved on through. All right, so tell us a little bit about what the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, what it's all about, what you guys do.
Yeah, our mission, we're very similar to the Highway Safety Institute. So if you think about them, they crash test cars, where our job is to crash test buildings and building components and building materials against severe weather. And really our mission is to stop the cycle of damage, disruption, displacement that unfortunately we see time and time again following severe weather. And the main forms of that we study are obviously hurricanes, windstorms of all kinds, tornadoes, straight line winds, derechos, you name it. We also look at hailstorms, and we do a lot of work on wildfire, which is also becoming a very, very pertinent topic these days. So our job is to figure out, one, what about these natural hazards and affect our built environment, our homes and businesses? What can we do about it? And then how do we stop that kind of repeated cycle when we have to build back to try to break that chain of disaster?
So with that in mind, and given the work that you guys do, as we mentioned, hurricane season right around the corner here, what are some simple tips people can take and do right now, maybe look around their home, or things they can do around their home right now as hurricane season approaches, but while it's still quiet?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. There are a really good slug of small things you can start to do right now. The first is take out your cell phone, and we tell folks to do this all the time. Go around, make a home inventory of all your stuff. That includes your TVs, your washer dryers, all that stuff, including your keepsakes and your valuables like that. It's going to make the claims process go a lot smoother if you happen to have that bad day and we got to deal with a hurricane this season. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of them lately. So that's one of them. That's a real easy one. We all have our cell phones. Go do it. Keep those photos geotagged, store them in the cloud somewhere, and keep them nice and handy. The next thing is to kind of take a walk around your house. So here we're looking for, trees overhanging your roof line. We all probably know a good limb comes down, it might actually damage our roof. So that's a thing to do. So get some, you can do it yourself if it's a small enough job, or to have a arborist come out, take a look at those trees, and you might want to make some trims to them to keep those branches from overhanging a roof. I actually did mine a couple years ago. And then also have a look at your windows and doors and look for any gaps around the framing. There's where you can take a tube of silicone caulk, caulk it up, just make sure that seal's nice and good so when any wind-driven rain can't get in there in the event we got to deal with another hurricane. So those are a couple of things that are good to do. They're small things that you can do yourself that help get you ready. That goes along with putting your kits together, your emergency kits, and going through that hurricane plan that we all have been through, unfortunately, an awful lot in South Louisiana lately.
So, Ian, you and I both from meteorology backgrounds. I just want to mention we're practicing what we preach. You talked about having your tree trimmed. I moved into a home a few months ago, and we had some trees out in front of this home that had taken a pretty big hit and some nasty, severe storms we had last year. I was a little bit worried about them, so I had an arborist come out, said, "You're okay right now, but some of these are getting near the end of their life, and we're going to need to keep an eye on them." So I think that's absolutely a key point. Let me ask you this too. You may know, I don't know, Chris Bannon is a forecaster at the National Weather Service in Slidell. And I thought this was a great point he made. We were at a conference last year, and he said not only about kind of keeping up your trees, but he said, think about where your trees are relative to your home direction-wise. So when a hurricane's coming, if you know most of the wind's going to be coming out of the south and east, and you've got some big trees south and east of you, then you know maybe a little more concerned with if a tree does topple, it might fall on your home versus, you know, if it's in a different direction, right?
That's a great tip by Chris, and a big shout out to him. He and I were classmates at ULM, and he's such a wonderful meteorologist, wonderful person. But that's a really good one. It actually takes that tree trimming down, kind of down in scale. It's even thinking about things like where would the peak winds come from, say, if we had a hurricane. And a lot of times that's going to be from the onshore flow direction in South Louisiana. So if you have, especially some of those big water oaks, things like that, that may be in those directions, you might want to think about what to do about them. Or if you have some lone pine trees by themselves, when they're not in clusters, can snap really easily. We saw that in Hurricane Michael across the Florida Panhandle and really southern Georgia. So that's a great tip to even kind of work your way down in scale, like getting a little bit more specific in there. So a great tip by Chris, and it's something, make that walk around your house and think about it. And we had a couple of maples right up against our house, so we needed to get those taken care of. And it also helps your roof age a little bit better. When you have overhanging trees, you get a lot of moisture that can build up on your shingles and things like that. So it's not only helpful in the severe weather situation, whether it's a thunderstorm or hurricane, it can actually add a little bit of life to your roof, trying to keep some of that moisture from just sitting right there on your shingles.
So I know another key point that you guys emphasize is a real potential weak spot in the home are the garage doors, right? So what I want to do is roll a little video that you guys have produced showing how some of these garage doors don't hold up so well to wind. And tell us what we're looking at and what people need to know when it comes to garage doors.
Yeah, Steve, in this test, we're at winds over 100 miles an hour here, and we're looking at a conventional non-wind rated garage door. And what can happen is, in this case, the garage door essentially just gets pushed inward, comes off its rails, and now you've let all that wind inside your house. One of the most important things when it comes to a windstorm, whether it's a tornado or hurricane, is keep the wind out. Once it gets in, it can start pushing kind of upward and outward, acting with some of those external forces. And our homes are not designed for this. And this is where we can see really huge amounts of damage. And this is a great example of that, where the garage door fails. This is at about 120 or so miles per hour. The wall system fails. We see this failure in tornadoes and hurricanes time and time again. And so it's a good idea, if you're in the market for a garage door, ask for a wind rated one. They should have a sticker on the back that's got some pressure ratings. And in fact, it's required by code that all doors have that sticker. And unfortunately, that's something we just don't see. It's not well enforced. In South Louisiana, you should have the ability to get one of the reinforced wind rated doors fairly easily. So that's something to think about. And the one point I want to kind of leave that segment with, on terms of, as we look at garage doors, is wind is really good at finding the weak spots of a home or a business, and it will exploit it. And that's that example we just showed, where you have the garage door fail, air gets in and pushes the wall out, and now we have a major structural problem with that particular home.
Since that's such a weak point, and you mentioned you can get those wind rated garage doors, are there options to retrofit existing doors, or is it more kind of a replace sort of thing if you don't have a good wind-rated garage door?
So there are some retrofit kits out there that basically just add bracing on the back. Sometimes it kind of depends on the year whether they're hard to find or not. I used to could find them at some of the big box stores. I haven't looked online lately, but they do exist, and they're pretty reasonable kind of substitutes for not having to deal with getting a whole new door put in. So keep an eye out for those retrofit kits. I know there's some DIY YouTube kits about adding some plywood or 2x4 bracing on the back of garage doors. That is an option. Just be very careful you don't damage the garage door in the process. The retrofit kits themselves are made particularly to be installed on conventional doors. So that's the one thing you don't want to do when you're doing some DIY work is damage your garage door to make things worse, and just by trying to put on a kind of a DIY fix. But it is something you can do, and we do encourage folks to do that. The garage door is a really weak spot. And that's what we're just trying to keep that wind out, just like we put shutters up to deal with debris impacts to keep those windows intact. It's the same deal.
I'm a big DIY guy, but also appreciate the heads up about being careful and doing it right, because we've all been there, right, where we want to do something ourselves and we try to push a little bit beyond our skill set and maybe don't do it quite right. Really important to get that right. Let's talk about this too. So another thing you guys talk about a lot are roofs. What do people need to know about the roofs, and is there anything they can look for on their own, or you really need to get a professional out there and look at it?
Yeah, Steve, I know a lot of people after really Zeta, Ida, and Southeast Louisiana are dealing with having new roofs. So the key part is to make sure you've got a backup underneath your asphalt shingles. Unfortunately, the wind performance of our conventional shingles we use every day is not great, and it starts to actually decline once your roof gets to be about 7, 8, 9 years old and becomes more susceptible to wind damage. So it's critical to have underneath when you re-roof. It's a great opportunity to really get some retrofits in there that can give you a better, stronger roof system. So the first part of that is adding additional nailing to the plywood decking using ring shank nails. These are nails with little tiny ribs on them that give you almost 2 times the uplift resistance of conventional nails. The next is to seal that deck. So that's keeping those gaps in the plywood decking panels sealed. There's a handful of different ways to do that. You can use a tape system. You can use a fully adhered, essentially peel and stick membrane type thing that goes over the whole roof system. I've actually seen some folks in Baton Rouge do that. Or you can actually use 2 layers of very heavy underlayment, that felt material. That'll do the trick as well. So that's kind of the next piece. And then there's some details about making sure the edge shingles are well sealed. But what unfortunately happens is our typical shingles just come unsealed and they start to kind of lift up. And that's something you can look for on your roof. If you see some of those tabs starting to bend upward and they're not laying nice and flat, then you might have a problem with some of those sealants. And it's worth having a roofer come check it out. Because in a hurricane scenario, the last thing you want is to create a vulnerability. Because of that, shingles come off, water comes in. All of us know that water in our houses, no matter where it comes from, is not a good thing. And this exact scenario, unfortunately, my aunt and uncle in Luling had to deal with this after Ida. I managed to get to their house. I was in the field for the storm, and they only had about 25% of the shingles lost on the roof. You wouldn't think that's that bad, but so much water got in, they ended up having to pretty much gut the inside of their home. So have that backup plan. In terms of research, we're working as hard as we can to solve this one, to try to get some better performance out of our very common roof covers, which is asphalt shingles.
So as you and I communicated leading up to today, you did mention to me your parents here in Baton Rouge had to re-roof, a few years ago, and they kind of took it another level and did what is called a fortified roof, right? Can you talk a little bit about what that is and what it entails?
Yeah, Steve, my parents followed our IBHS Fortified Roof guidelines. It's a standard that you can give to your roofer that basically takes you through the elements I just mentioned, the added nailing pattern, sealing the deck, and those edge details. So they went through the process. For us at IBHS, we have evaluators out there that can actually evaluate your roofer's work and actually help you get a designation from IBHS that you have a fortified roof. And in most places, and that includes Louisiana coming up here very soon, that qualifies you for an insurance discount. There's some legislation that just went into effect or is about to go into effect over the next couple of months that will make sure that everybody who has one of those can get a insurance discount. So that's a thing. Check out fortifiedhome.org. All sorts of great information about the Fortified program. You can find out about the various levels of protection. But when you re-roof, it is a great time to take that step and do something to get a better, stronger roof. And my parents did it. I'm going to give a shout out to my parents, Jim and Gloria. My mom was very proud of their roof system. even though on the outside it looks like a normal roof, but all the details underneath are what matter. And I was really happy that they followed our guidance, and they had to shop it around, right? They had to talk to a couple roofers. My dad walked them through the process, showed them some of our training videos from IBHS, and they got it done. And that's becoming more and more prevalent across South Louisiana as this program grows. So if you go off to the east and say Mississippi and Mobile, everybody's going to know it by heart. In fact, here's a great stat for you, Steve. Almost 20% of the single-family homes in Mobile and Baldwin counties off to our east have fortified designations. It's actually put into code there. They lead the way in hurricane resilience, and it's a wonderful story.
Wow, that's impressive. So the next question that naturally follows that, I think, is people are saying, okay, maybe I need to get my roof redone right now. What is the added cost in doing a fortified roof versus just doing the standard re-roof?
Yeah, so you're looking at somewhere between 8 to 12% added cost. And I'll tell a little story about my parents. I actually was looking up some cost information when they were ready to do their roof. And I estimated it was about an added about $1,100 onto the job. Their roofer actually came in just under that, which was really neat to see. So that's what it was in terms of total cost. It's usually somewhere around 8 to 13% total cost. But we do encourage folks, talk to several different roofers. And if you kind of get stonewalled right off the bat saying, oh, you don't need that, shop it around. We look and rate everything these days. Why not do that with your roof, and making sure you get a roofer that's going to give you what you need and what you want as a customer.
All right, so when we're talking about things like the roof and the tree, these are kind of pre-season things you can address right now. Earlier you mentioned taking a good inventory of things in your home. There any recommendation you give to people as a storm is maybe approaching, if they haven't done what are things they can do in a short time window as a storm approaches?
Yeah, some of those great last minute things are, again, around your home. Make sure whatever can become rolling or flying debris, you get picked up and tucked inside as best you can. And if you can't, put it as close up against a wall as you can. I even had some friends in Louisiana ratchet strap some of their outdoor furniture down, tucked it up against the wall of their house under a patio. You're just trying to keep things from rolling and becoming debris. Some of the things about caulking your windows and doors, you can do that last minute if you want. If you find you have time and want to make a pass around your home, that's a good idea to do. You might be able to stop a few of those little water leaks that can come with wind-driven rain. And then, get your kits ready to go like we always talk about. I think we all know the drill and know if you're in a flood zone that floods readily and have that plan. So those are a handful of things that you can do. And of course, if you've got a generator, make sure you use it safely. We see far too many fatalities that come from just kind of poor practices when it comes to generators. We just don't want to see that. So yeah, we've been through the drill a bunch, and I think folks are probably a little wary of it and have done it a bunch, but it does pay off, and it can help reduce a lot of that anxiety that comes with when hurricane season starts and when we got those named storms that are bearing down on us.
Ian, I did want to give your website a plug here since you mentioned some of those tips. You've got great lists here, great resources. So some of the things we were just talking about. So this is disastersafety.org/hurricane. People can visit that. And for example, what we were just talking about, last minute hurricane prep, if you click on that, you can get a list of tips that you can roll on through. Tidy up outdoors. It talks about shutters and closing the garage door, closing your interior doors, maybe something people don't talk about, contacts on your phone. So I did want to mention that website is a great resource for people as well. So let me ask you this. Also, obviously, we've been dealing with all these hurricanes. We're also a very flood-prone region. You know it, being from this area. Anything people can do, think about right now just to prepare for flooding or maybe lowering their risk a little bit?
Yeah, so flooding, that's the one. Make sure you have a national flood insurance policy. Go get flood insurance. Even if I think the Baton Rouge flood from a couple years ago probably startled a lot of people as to where water can go. If you live where it rains, it can flood. And so even if you're outside some of the major floodplains, you can get kind of cost-effective flood insurance through the NFIP program. So it's important for folks to understand that your typical homeowner's policy doesn't cover flood. Now, there are some things there's some new technologies, especially if you're a business owner, that are starting to come on the market about flood protection barriers for your business to help protect your doors and openings and things like that to try to keep floodwaters out. So there's some of that. But unfortunately, with water is very, very powerful, and there's not a whole lot you can do. You can go up. That's what we do is preach about elevation if you're building a structure that's in an area that can flood. But some of those tips that are there, as technology improves, there may be more and more to come. But again, having a flood insurance policy through NFIP is it's that safety net, and it's really important that folks take a look at that. And we want to make sure everybody's got as much tools as they can to help recover after a bad event.
I just want to mention practicing what we preach again. I carry flood insurance at my house. I'm in a low risk zone, but 2016, boy, if you didn't get the message that even areas that can be considered low risk can still flood, you've really missed the message. So I second what you're saying there. Let's transition quickly because you're also involved in what I think is some really interesting research separate from hurricanes. You guys kind of do some neat research with hail. I'm going to roll a little video, and I think in this video we see you out in the field a little bit, even picking up some hailstones. So tell us what this is all about, what you guys are trying to figure out as it relates to hail.
Yeah, so hail, most people don't realize this. In any given year, about 60 to 80% of the damage that comes from severe thunderstorms is hail related, and a lot of that is to the roof. So unfortunately, hail research in the United States has kind of been stagnant since about the late 70s. And that includes the test standards that we use to test building materials for hail resistance. They're actually not very representative of real world hail conditions. So we started a field program all the way back in 2012 to go measure really everything about hail and hailstorms. We have equipment where we can crush hailstones to see how much force it takes to fracture them. That in turn leads to different types of damage. We've actually built all that information into a new testing protocol to test materials. And we even rate asphalt shingles for their hail resistance. You can actually find that on our website. If you just Google IBHS shingle ratings, you'll find them. And it's all rooted in the science we've done. And we've even turned more to understanding hailstorms in particular. We have instruments we can set up in front of a thunderstorm and let it pass over. And we get to see how much hail fell, of what sizes, at what time, and all that good stuff to get you a very complete picture of a peril that a lot of people don't realize is super damaging. Hail's not a great life safety threat. It's not one of those kind of in-your-face things we think about like tornadoes or even lightning for that matter. But it is a huge source of damage, and that's why we do the work we do to study hail with the goal to essentially start getting better materials on folks' roofs, especially if you think about areas of like Dallas, Fort Worth, or Oklahoma City. You've got people who are probably on their third or fourth roof in maybe a 10-year window. One, that's annoying, having to get your roof replaced that much. Two, that's a lot of material going into landfills. Three, that's a lot of dollars that are showing up. So we want to help start to slow some of that damage down and bend that loss curve through better building materials.
That's a great stuff. So I have a personal question, a curiosity when it comes to hail, and I don't know if there's an easy answer to this. I know there's so many variables when it comes to hail and roof damage, but have you guys been able to hone in at all on maybe what the minimum sort of hail size is when you start seeing kind of significant roof damage?
So it is a little bit more complicated. So typically we would look at about 1.5 inches to where we start seeing the dents and cracks on a conventional shingle, one that does not carry an impact rated or one of our good or excellent performers. But we started to learn in places like the Front Range of Colorado, where they get these hailstorms that they need to get the snow plows out. We call them snowplow hail. These are often filled with thousands and thousands of hailstones per square foot of 3/4 to 1 inch hail sizes. And what we've learned in the lab by simulating these is that those type of events actually are really good at knocking off the little rocky granules that are on your shingles. And those granules are there to actually protect the underlying asphalt mat. Asphalt, when it's exposed to sunlight, direct sunlight, UV, will start to degrade and become brittle. So it's actually raised our level of concern that smaller hail in large numbers may be doing a fair bit of damage to your roof in the long term, where it presents a challenge where it might be shortening the lifetime of your roof simply by being exposed to these type of events. Now in South Louisiana, we don't have to deal with that too often, but we have had some pretty pretty meaningful hail events here recently, even down in the New Orleans area. So, for a conventional roof, it's about 1.5 inches that you're going to start seeing those dents and tears. If you have a crack or a tear in your shingle, that's where you introduce the potential for water entry. And again, that's what we're trying to avoid. That's the big amplifier and damage when water gets in your home. So there's a little nugget about hail damage. And again, once you get up to about 2 inches in size, you're going to get pretty severe damage. And when you reach 3 inches in size, there's where you run the risk of the hailstone, maybe even puncturing your plywood roof deck. So hail can do a lot of things, and not a lot of it is good.
Well, I'm hoping we don't see any 3-inch hail down here. That would be pretty rare, but no, that's some great information. And I guess most important, right, if we do get a big hailstorm, you've got to get somebody up on the roof that really knows what they're looking for to assess the damage, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Have your insurance agent's phone number in your cell phone. Give them a call as soon as, if you think you have damage, they can get an inspector out. We often try to avoid some of the roofing companies that knock on your doors immediately following the event. We don't want folks to get taken advantage of. And unfortunately, we have kind of that storm chasing industry in the building world that often we can see some of those instances happen. So look for those good roofing contractors too that are part of our community in Baton Rouge and in the surrounding areas. Have them come out, take a look. But again, give your agent a call immediately if you think you had 1 inch, 1.5 inch hail. You might want to have somebody look at your roof. Give them a ring. Oftentimes they have their preferred networks that can also help you out and get the ball rolling with an inspection. Because the last thing we want to happen is for damage to go unnoticed, and then we have that water problem that we've been talking about for both hazards here, hail and wind. So those are some things to think about.
Ian, there's been some great stuff this morning. Any last minute words or tips for people before we get into hurricane season?
Now, as always, everybody, y'all know the drill. We'll stay prepared. We'll do it again. But think about some of those things you can do around your home, and encourage folks to check out our Hurricane Ready guide. Again, that's disastersafety.org/Hurricane Ready. If you just Google IBHS Hurricane Ready, you'll find it too. So there's some great tips there. And if you find yourself ready to make some of those big steps, the roof and your garage door, those are two places where you can make a really big difference in the strength of your home come the next storm. So Steve, it was absolutely great to talk to you, and happy to talk to the folks back home in Baton Rouge.
Absolutely. Dr. Ian Giammanco, thank you very much. Doing a Baton Rouge native, doing some great work out there and some great research. I got to mention, I know you're at a conference this week, so I really appreciate you allotting us this time.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Great to be here.
All right, folks. So again, Dr. Ian Giammanco with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. Some great information there. We mentioned a couple of great websites with some resources, disastersafety.org. You've also got fortifiedhome.org. So go check those out. And really some great information. Hopefully they'll help get you ready for hurricane season. Before I wrap it up, speaking of that, do need to mention we're going to do a week-long series of Coast and Climate the week that hurricane season begins. So beginning on Monday, May 30th, I will have a new episode daily. So on Monday, we'll have Congressman Garrett Graves. He's going to talk about Risk Rating 2.0. That's the new National Flood Insurance Program. Some adjustments that could mean much higher rates for some of you. He's going to talk about the co-meet diversion. On Tuesday, we will have Dr. Phil Klotzbach, who does the seasonal hurricane forecast that you're probably familiar with. He's also going to talk a little bit about maybe, is it time to kind of retire the Saffir-Simpson scales? We'll have a look at that. Wednesday, we talked to another Baton Rouge native, Dr. Jack Bevan. He's been at the National Hurricane Center for something like 30 years. He was the lead author on the Hurricane Ida report. So we'll talk to him about Ida and why it didn't get the upgrade to Category 5. Some of you have been asking about that. Thursday of that week, it's Dr. Chris Lancy, also from the National Hurricane Center. The connection between climate change and hurricanes, where does that stand? He's going to have an interesting take, I think, so check that out. And to wrap it up that week, Friday, Dr. Liz Skilton from UL Lafayette. She's written a book, really gets into the history of naming hurricanes, so be sure to join us for that. But we'll wrap it up for now. And again, we'll be back here every Thursday at 10 o'clock.